Today I had planned to share a completely different message because we were going to talk about the deacon ordination. And the Lord very clearly said, nah, that's not what our people need today. That's not what His people need today. So I'm going to invite you to join me in Mark chapter number 6, and we're going to talk about what it looks like going into the storm. Mark chapter 6. If you're a guest of ours, we've been working our way through the Gospel of Mark, and we're nearing the end of this chapter, and the chapter begins with Jesus sending out his disciples, and He's empowering them, and they come back saying, look at all the miracles that we've been able to do, and yet Jesus knows they're exhausted, and they're weary, and they're tired, and so He puts them on a boat, and He says, let's go to a remote place. And when they get to that remote place, the crowd has already followed them, and so Jesus sees the multitudes, and He does this amazing miracle. He feeds the 5,000 with just a few loaves and fishes, and then He gathers His disciples and He puts them in a boat again, but He doesn't get in with them this time. And they head out, although they don't know it, they head out into the storm. Here's our encouragement, our hope as believers in Jesus. The storms in our lives often become the moments when Jesus reveals Himself most clearly. We don't want the storms, we don't want them, but without them, sometimes we just won't see Jesus for who He truly is. So we're going to pick it up in Mark chapter 6 and verse number 45. Mark chapter 6, verse 45. Says this, immediately Jesus made His disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of Him to Bethsaida while He dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, He went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake and He was alone on the land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, He went out to them walking on the lake. I can't see. Where am I? Do I have that right? I can't see what I'm doing up there, so I'm just going to read the scriptures, and Hudson, if you can help me. It says, He was about to pass by them. I'm in the middle of verse 48. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw Him walking on the lake, they thought He was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw Him and were terrified. Immediately He spoke to them and said, take courage, it is I, don't be afraid. Then He climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down. They were completely amazed, for they had not understood about the loaves. Their were hardened. Now we're going to walk through Mark chapter 6, but before we do, I want to show you two other passages that have this same story in it, and we're not going to read the whole thing, we're just going to pick out a little piece. Matthew chapter 14, if you have your Bible, Matthew chapter 14. Matthew 14 is going to tell us the same story, but Matthew 14 is going to share two details that Mark does not. One, Matthew's going to talk about Peter walking on the water. And two, Matthew's going to tell us that at the end, the disciples worshiped them. So Matthew chapter 14, I'm just going to read starting in verse number 28, because the rest of this passage is a little bit similar to what Mark has, but this is different. Verse 28. Lord, if it's You, Peter replied, tell me to come to You on the water. Come, He said. Now I'm going to pause right here because there were two things in Peter's discussion, or two things Peter said that really stood out to me as I was preparing this. The first is the fact that Peter, he didn't ask Jesus to come to him. He asked if he could go to Jesus, which I was like, now that's very interesting. You're in the middle of a storm and you want to get out of the boat? Okay. Look at verse number 30, or verse 29. Come, He said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward verse 30. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out His hand and caught him. You little, why did you doubt? Now, I love this. When Peter begins to sink, he begins to cry. But notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't turn back to the boat, to the guys that he was just with, and say, help me. Why? Because they're in a storm too. He's sinking and he's like, Lord, save me. It's like, why does Peter think that Jesus could save him? And here's where we get some really amazing Old Testament connections. It's likely that Peter, maybe as he thought back on this, maybe right in the moment, I don't know. But Peter recognizes, there's only one person that can walk on the water. The book of Job tells us, chapter 9, verse 8, says, he alone. Hang on. Hudson, can you find Job chapter 9? He alone stretches out the heavens and treads on the waves of the sea. That means that it is Yahweh alone that walks on the water. And so Peter recognizes if someone's walking on the water, it's got to be God. Lord, save me. And here's my encouragement to each of us. When we walk through storms, when we are in the middle of a storm, if we turn to a spouse, if we turn to a doctor, if we turn to a therapist, if we turn to a pastor and say, help me. Listen, I needed someone to pray over me today, and I'm so thankful for those of you who did. I'm not your help. I mean, I could point you to the one that can help you, but I can't help you. We have to learn as a faith family, as an individual walking through the storm, that a boat full of friends isn't our answer. The one walking on the water alone is. In Matthew 14, verse 32, this is how it ends, and I just want to point this out to you, where it says, and they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly you are the Son of God. Okay, so Mark's gospel doesn't mention this, but at the end, when Jesus gets back in the boat, they fall and worship, and that's going to be important. And here's why. What did Jesus just get done doing? Feeding 5,000, this incredible miracle. And yet we read of no worship. But now, he calms the storm. And they fall in worship. Without the storm, there is no worship. You say, why is that? Because a great miracle of feeding the multitudes, it didn't stir them to worship because it wasn't for them. They got used. They were partnering with Jesus to share the food. But when the storm came, they needed his salvation. And they didn't see him just doing amazing miracles for others, witnessing, wow, our God's great. No, they experienced him calming their storm. Which reminds us, it's the presence of Jesus, not the absence of storms, that truly brings us peace. Jesus was more concerned about calming his disciples' hearts in the storm than he was about calming the storm for his disciples. Because he was teaching them, this is who I am. You need me. You don't need calm waters. You need me. And then in John's gospel, if you have your Bibles, we're going to go to John chapter 6. John's gospel shows us just one unique detail that none of the other gospel writers share. And again, it's right at the end, but it's such a unique detail that John shares in verse number 20. Again, the passage is a little bit longer than just this, but this is right at the end. But John writes this in verse number 20 of chapter number 6. It says, but he said to them, it is I. Don't be afraid. Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. Which tells us this, right? John writes that Jesus didn't just calm the storm. He carried his disciples. Like, I don't know how every gospel writer doesn't include this detail, because that is really cool. Jesus is walking on the water. He gets to the boat. He steps into the boat with them, and suddenly they're at the shore. These men had been rowing for hours, and I no doubt they were exhausted and they were drained, and the emotions of fear and worry and anxiety of what's going to happen to us. And then Jesus shows up, and not only does he calm the storm, but he carries them to the shore. And I just think, what compassion. Like I can just hear Jesus as that boat lands at the shore just immediately, just looking at his disciples with a smile on his face that just says, I saw your labor. I know your toil. I saw those winds blowing against you and how hard you were working. And I just wanted to carry you to where you needed to get to. You know, there are some of you who walked in today facing a storm. Some that we know about. I mean, we got to pray over some, and others you walked in here and really it's just you're dealing with that storm on your own and nobody knows about, but Jesus knows. And here's my encouragement. Put down the oars for a moment. Stop fighting the wind. Invite Jesus into the boat. And then let him carry you. I mean, constantly it's this idea of, come unto me and I will give you rest. Jesus is to be a part of our lives, to draw us close to him, to show him, not only can I calm the winds, but I can carry you to where you need to get to. So those are the two details, or those are the details from the other two Gospels. Would you go back to Mark chapter 6 with me? And I just want to walk through these verses. And we're going to use our Bibles. We're going to continue to use our Bibles quite a bit right here. Mark chapter 6, verse 45. We've already read it, but let me read again. Immediately, Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida, meaning Jesus sent them without him, while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. So they're headed out to the sea. He's headed up to a mountain. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on the land. Notice these next words. He saw the disciples. No, wait a second. They're in the middle of the lake, at least 3 to 4 miles from where Jesus is. He's on a mountain. They're on the water. He's on the land. There is the middle of the night, and they are in a storm. And we read, he saw them. How comforting. They couldn't see Jesus, but he could see them. Do you ever ask yourself, does Jesus know what I'm going through? May I just remind you, he sees, he knows, and he is aware of it all. And there is no storm he cannot calm. There is no circumstance in your life he is not aware of. And let's keep reading, verse 48, right? So we're still there. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. Okay, let's just pause there for a moment. This is a little bit comical to me, but you have 12 men rowing for hours, and Jesus now walks and catches up to them. And we can't think of this being a calm sea. Like, this is a stormy sea. And Jesus is somehow I don't know if he's walking on top of the waves or if the waves kind of part like they did for Moses, but here's the thing. We know that wind was not blowing contrary to Jesus, because the winds don't blow against their creator. The winds bow down to their creator. And so I'm just kind of picturing the path like Moses, in some ways, not on dry ground, but just that water becoming a surface for Jesus to walk. I have no idea what it looked like. It's just cool to think about it. But verse 48, he saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." What do we do with that statement at the end of verse 48? He was about to pass by them. Do we read that and say, man, Jesus didn't care? I don't. I mean, like, he was on the land. So he's on the land. He sees his disciples in distress. He walks on the water to them, and he's just going to go around them? Just going to go right on past them? Oh, I hope that you're ready for an exciting Old Testament glimpse right now, because those words are intentional. If God passes by, something cool happens. See, this is an echo. All the way back, and I'm going to encourage you don't have to, but I'm going to encourage you to join me in Exodus chapter 33. In Exodus chapter number 33, Moses is on the top of Mount Sinai with Yahweh. He has been there for days receiving the 10 Commandments. And although he has spent time with Yahweh, he says something unique to him in Exodus 33, verse 18. He says, "Show me your glory." Let me read with you. Then Moses said, "Now show me your glory." And Yahweh said, "I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, Yahweh, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion." Verse number 20. "But," he said, "you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live." Then Yahweh said, "There is a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen." So Moses says, "Show me your glory." And he's like, listen, I'll let my glory pass by. Here's what we're going to do. Here's a rock. It's a split rock. I'm going to put you behind the rock. I'm going to put my hand over that rock. I'm going to pass by you. You're only going to see the trail of my glory. Because if you really saw me in my full glory, you wouldn't be able to live. And this is exactly what happened. Look at the very next chapter, chapter number 34. And as we read this, look for three things here. Look for three things. Look for the glory of God, look for the name of God, and look for the worship of God. Okay, let's watch for those three things. Verse 5, Exodus 34. "Then Yahweh came down in the cloud and stood there with him and proclaimed his name, Yahweh. And he passed in front of Moses, proclaiming, Yahweh, Yahweh, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands, and forgiving wickedness and rebellion and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children and their children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation." Moses bowed to the ground at once and worshiped. Okay, so here's what we have in this passage. The glory of God passed by, and the name of God was proclaimed, resulting in the worship of God. How does the glory of God pass by? Moses is placed behind a cleft rock, a split rock, to see through the rock the glory of God. Do you know how you and I get a chance to see the glory of God? Through a torn flesh of the rock of our salvation. We only see the Father through the broken Son, our rock. And the name of God, Yahweh, was proclaimed, and it is a beautiful name, and it begins with his faithfulness, and it ends with his justice, yes, but he starts out by saying, "I abound in compassion and grace." The name Yahweh is proclaimed, and it all results in the worship of God. Moses falls down, and he has this encounter with Yahweh that changes him forever. His face will forever glow with the glory of God. That is what takes place on the mountain of Sinai. And here's what we have to understand. That is what was taking place on the Sea of Galilee. You say, wait, what? Yeah. Let's go back to Mark 6, right? What happens? What was passing by? Jesus was passing by. Jesus is the glory of God. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse number 6, Paul tells us, in the face of Jesus is the glory of God. So the very glory of God was passing by. And as the glory of God passed by, the name of God was proclaimed. And I know you're probably looking back to Mark 6 and saying, I do not see the name of God being proclaimed at all. What did Jesus say? Do not fear. It is I. In the Greek, those words would be ego, eimi. Ego, eimi. You say, why would we care about that? Because when the Old Testament was translated into Greek, the Hebrew words of Yahweh, I am, when I am was translated from Hebrew, Yahweh, into Greek, they used the words ego, eimi. Which means as Jesus, who is the glory of God, when he was passing by and he pronounced, it is I, he was using the very divine name of God. He was saying, don't fear, the I am is with you. The very thing that Moses got to hear on the top of Sinai. And this moment gets even better. Don't turn there just for time, but let me show you what Isaiah 43 actually says, because here again we see the name and the do not fear, but a very unique phrase. But now this is what Yahweh says, Israel. He who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel, do not fear. We just heard those words. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. How does Yahweh show up to be with us as we pass through the waters if we don't face the storm? How does the glory of God appear when we're not even looking for him? And as we saw when the glory of God passed by and the name of God was proclaimed, the result was the worship of God. This moment on the Sea of Galilee was a repeated echo of what had happened on the mountain of Sinai. And I just want to tell you, as you walk through your storm, it's just another echo. Because Jesus wants to show up. And he wants to say, I am here. You may not even see me, but I am walking to you. I know where you are. I am here. And for those of you that have ever suffered a deep tragedy, you know that it sometimes takes years and years, but we look back and the most difficult days of our lives are the days we sometimes will say have formed us more and more into the image of Jesus. And we end up worshiping because of the storm. I do believe Jesus could stop any storm at any time. But in a broken world, storms are inevitable. Death we will face, it is inevitable. Heartache we will face, it is inevitable. And if you think you can live life without facing a storm, you're not living in a reality. You will face a storm. The question is, are you looking for the glory of God to show up? Are you listening for the name of God to be declared? And will you at some point allow His presence to lead you to worship? Because the storms that shake us never shake our King. He's a wave walker who carries us safely home. See, more than stopping the storm or getting you to shore, Jesus wants to reveal Himself to you. He wants to show you His glory, to let you hear His name, and to move you to worship despite the storm, sometimes in the storm. Can I invite our worship team to come on up? And we're just going to close today by singing that final song one more time. I trust in God, my Savior. And as we sing, here's my invitation to you. Like I really do want to see us be a church that pursues Jesus and to praise Jesus and to point others to Jesus. I really feel like that's what we are. But there are some of us who are in the storm right now. Some of you are coming out of the storm. Some of us, we don't even know it, but we're headed into one. And here's just wherever you are, recognize the I Am sees us. He walks towards us. He calls us by name. And the invitation, the worship that we offer is simply trust me in the storm.